So if people were wondering, we now have Sefer Torahs. Because we have Shelley and Antavin added the cords so that we have, in case there are earthquakes, there's less chance the Torahs will fall over. So they definitely are safer. Now, but I was thinking about Rabbi Roller's introduction to the Torah this morning, especially about Thanksgiving, because that really would set a cat among the canaries if we weren't able to keep any of our turkey beyond the first day. So what do we do with that part of the Thanksgiving offering? I guess they got it wrong, and so we do too. Shabbat Shalom. I was thinking a lot about the Torah reading this week, especially after studying it with my colleagues on Tuesday morning. We had a Hasidic teaching that really brought the Torah reading to life, which is really difficult considering it's about sacrifices. And I want to share that. I've done a little bit of that over the week, but I've really been thinking, and I think it's actually quite profound, because here we have the Torah, we have all of these descriptions about the sacrifices, we have all sorts of laws that are now in abeyance, laws that we don't want to get back to, or at least hopefully most of us don't. It's nice to have prayer up here. We don't really want to see animals getting their throats cut and being burnt till morning, even if we do get to eat the turkey. We want to take the ideas behind the sacrifices, the ideas that Rabbi Roller talked about Thanksgiving, about peace, about other things that the sacrifices lead us to consider. But I think we found that there are a lot better ways to do it than by burning animals. So what do we do with these texts? What do we do? After all, this is still Torah. This is the books that God gave us. These are the words that were passed down to us over the generations. This is the essence of what it means to be Jewish. So there must be some wisdom in it. At least we hope so. Now, if we read it in a fundamentalist way, taking everything literally and going chronologically and line by line, then this text has historical significance. It tells us what our ancestors used to do, and we think about it and read it as a way of connecting ourselves with our ancestors, even though this is no longer the desirable way to worship. But is it only a text which is history, only a text which reminds us of the past, or has it something more profound to say? Well, Ben Bagbag said, turn it, everything is in it. In teaching us, perhaps, that there's something in every little bit of Torah. If we search it hard enough, we can find a kernel of truth. We can find something that's relevant in our lives. And that takes a reading which is far from fundamentalist. It takes a reading where we actually, to a degree, atomize the text. We tear it into little pieces, and we read each verse for its teachings without necessarily wondering or worrying about its historical context and time. Our time is what's important. The lessons of what the Torah has for us, that's what's important. Now, this may sound radical. This may sound like something that some modern Jew might do. And yet, it really is the essence, beginning with Midrash, where the rabbis look at the Torah line by line and derive deep meanings without worrying about context. And it goes to the essence of Kabbalah, which takes the Torah and finds hidden meanings in each verse. And that's what I want to share with you this morning, hidden meanings that were found in verses that sound very prosaic, and yet, if we find the hidden meanings, it moves from the prosaic to the profound. So the verse goes as follows: Vayidaber Nile Moshe lemor, Tzavet Aharon v'et banav lemor, Zot Torah ha'olah, hi ha'olah al v'kad al mukda v'al hamizbeach kol halayla ad haboker. The Eish HaMizbeach Tukad Bo. So it says And then there's the next verses too is important, but we'll get to that. So the verse says something that doesn't sound terribly profound. And God spoke to Moses saying, command Aaron and his sons, this is the ritual of the burnt offering. The burnt offering, all those that Rabbi Roller was talking about, shall remain where it is, burnt upon the altar all night until morning. And while the fire on the altar is kept going on it. And then it adds that the priest will dress in fine linen in the morning, and then he will take the ashes and shovel them and place them on the side of the altar. So those are our verses, and it doesn't sound terribly exciting. It doesn't sound profound. I don't know, do people have their shovels with them? Probably not. But for the author of Hasidic text, Dego Machaneh Ephraim, the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, he skipped my mind for a second, Moshe Chaim, he has a profound reading of this text that actually leads us to think about our own spiritual lives. It leads us to think about how we transform the world, and it leads us to think about where our prayers should lead us. That sounds really dramatic considering we're talking about burning offerings on an altar all night and then shoveling them. So how does he get to this place? He gets to the place by thinking about the words and thinking about what really our spiritual lives are like and how they're difficult, but how they can transform. So he says, what exactly, looking at the verse word by word, he says, what exactly are these olahs that we give? What exactly are these burnt offerings that we bring forth to God? And he says, of course, they're not sacrifices. We don't do that anymore. But we still offer olot. We still offer things to God. And ultimately, that which we offer are our prayers. Our prayers are where we speak most deeply to God in the darkness of our nights, in our lives in exile. We speak to God, we reach out to God, we try to connect with God. And that too is the meaning of the offering. The offering sends smoke to the heavens, that smoke bringing our prayers metaphorically to God. So he says, that's what this is talking about. This is talking about the prayers we offer. But not only are they the prayers that we offer, but the prayers that we offer when we feel God in our lives, or at least an aspect of God. He takes a simple word, the word zot, and he says this tells us that the prayers, these olot we offer, are offered through the Shekhinah, God's presence that we feel in our lives. And zot, he finds that in the Zohar. Zot always refers to the Shekhinah. Zeh always refers to a different aspect of God, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, somewhat higher, but the two are intimately connected. And he says, this Zot reminds us that the Shekhinah is present with us. The Shekhinah is here wherever we are. If we open our eyes in the darkest of nights, then even with the darkness, we still can find God's presence. God, in essence, is in exile with us. God, in essence, is suffering with us. And then he says, what can we learn about the Eish, the fire that burns up these olot, these prayers on the altar? And he says, this fire is the burning love that the Shekhinah has to be reunited with God, to remind us of the essential yichud, the essential oneness of God, the essential oneness of the universe, that which we seek in our lives to realize that everything, that we are all one. And I feel that what he really is pointing at also is not only the burning love that the Shekhinah has, but it really has to be the burning love that we offer in our prayers, the intense desire we have to find that universal unity, to find the oneness that brings us all together and will create a world of peace. And what then, of course, is night? Night is the reality of the darkness of our souls. Night is the reality of the galut that we find ourselves. And this maybe is a physical galut. And of course, here we are sitting very comfortably in Cupertino, but it still is considered to be a galut. The world is still in need of a redemption, but it's also a spiritual galut, where we're separated from God, where we're separated from our fellow human beings, where we separate ourselves from the universe. We see ourselves as independent and alone without realizing that we all are one. So this is the darkness of the soul. It's the darkness of our spiritual journeys, where sometimes we find it almost impossible to find God, when sometimes we find it almost impossible to see a way out. And yet the Shekhinah is there, the burning fire is there, reminding us that Boker comes, and that's at the end of our verse. Boker being the light of redemption. Boker being the moment when that world is perfected, when we find ourselves at one with each other, when we can transform the world. But then, Rav Moshe Chaim wonders, how do we make this step? How do we achieve this spiritual movement from darkness to light? And it's not only a spiritual movement, but it's a physical movement as well. And here, he takes the next verse, which sounded even less inspiring perhaps as the first. We have the priest, he puts on his work clothing, he gets on probably his work boots, takes out his shovel, and shovels some ashes. A pretty dirty job. But for Rabbi Moshe Chaim, this is a profound and essential step, because he suggests that the priest, who represents the aspect of love, of chesed, is not only a descendant of the Levitical priests, but actually all of us, part of a Mamlechet Kohanim, all of us are priests. Just as that burning love that the Shekhinah felt needs to be felt with all of us, the chesed transcends a group of Jews descended from Aaron and reaches out to every Jew and probably to every human being. All of us created B'Tselem Elokim. All of us created in the image of God. So what do we have to do? What do we do as Levitical priests? Well, in the text, it says we work. We shovel the ashes. So what can that mean? And what indeed is Chesed? Well, in the Gemara, King David talks about what Chesed is. And he talks about the idea that he had spent the whole night showing this love for God by trying to solve the problems between husbands and wives to ensure marital harmony. And King David is very proud. He says, this shows love. Interestingly, the Gemara, rather the Zohar, picks up on this and says, don't be so arrogant, King David, because a toad turns to him and says, you think that's good, you spending all night? Well, I spend my whole night croaking and praying to God, and that's even better. I love that image of the frog or the toad. But still, this act of King David is showing love is what we need to do. Doing action is what we need to be doing, and that's what Rab Moshe Chaim picks up on. Now, Rabbi Roller, when we were studying the text, shared an interesting Gemara that I found rather troubling but also inspiring. He talked about this job when the priests are shoveling the ashes, and he said this was such an important thing and such a holy action that the priests would rush to do it, and they would be climbing up to the altar on the platform, going up to the altar, and they'd be knocking each other off in the excitement of being the first one, because it was the first one who got to do the job of shoveling the ashes. Just imagine it, if we were rushing to clean up. Rabbi Roller, actually in the Gemara, there's actually even more troubling addendum where one priest even gets killed in this process of their rushing. We're going to ignore that one. But even though this is a bit messy, the idea of rushing to do a mitzvah is an exciting idea for me. And the idea of rushing to do chesed, rushing to do these acts of loving kindness, is at the essence of Rabbi Moshe Chaim is telling us as we move from our prayers at night to transforming the world. What he's saying is, at night we offer our olot. At night we expend our profound love, and we express that love and that burning fire for God, for the Shekhinah, for creating yichud, for transcending the darkness. And then those prayers lead us to realize that what we need to do as we move towards Boker, for mourning, for redemption, is actually to do the work of redemption. L'taken olam b'malchut Shaddai, to transform the world in God's image. And as we metaphorically find ways of shoveling those holy ashes, making the world better, then indeed the morning dawns. So we take 3 rather simple verses, and in the words of a Hasidic Rebbe, we transform them to a mission for us as we pray and as our prayers lead us to make a better world. Shabbat Shalom.